Hi, guys. Well, we don't need to tell you that getting people to stick around, finding good people, getting them to stick around is getting harder and harder. I can attest that's definitely true in TV news. So today I think we're going to talk about maybe some less traditional ways of keeping employees happy and keeping them around. And so we want to introduce to you Dr. Alan Witt. He is a professor of management and leadership, public policy, and psychology at the Bauer School of Business at U of H. Go Cougs. So thank you very much for sharing your expertise. So we just kind of went through your many titles there. You actually have a fairly broad range, if you will, of expertise. Can you tell us a little bit about how you decided to or got these areas, these subject matters underneath you, and how that's helped you in the HR world?
Well, you know what it's like in college, you can be indecisive. And I was indecisive, so I had 3 majors. And today I work with a lot of folks. We work on workplace issues, and we work with architects and designers, environmental psychologists and other professionals. Traditionally in the corporate world, real estate issues are handled by corporate real estate, and their motivation is cost. And by bringing in people with various professions, we can apply science to the design and redesign of workplaces. Plus, I talk to a lot of MBA and executive MBA students to kind of find out what the trends are. And then my wife tells me what to do.
Well, that sounds like the perfect trifecta formula.
Indeed.
So let's talk about that workspace. Everybody's familiar with the traditional ways of keeping employees happy, right? Their salary, bonuses, benefits, health insurance. But you have some pretty interesting ideas just about our workspace in general. Something as simple as color schemes you think can make a difference?
Well, when people look at designing the workplace or even your home, any kind of place where we go, whether it's a sacred place, a shared space, or a private space, there are certain features that affect our needs in the workplace. And in many cases, it's an emotional response and a physiological one. One of them has to do with indoor environmental quality. So we're experiencing some of that right now, and it's called glare, if you're at this angle. Noise. If you're from this area, you're probably familiar with mold or appropriate airflow, or maybe it's too hot or it's too cold. And these kinds of things are extremely distracting. So we want places that won't harm us. So indoor environmental quality is very important. One that I just learned about a few years ago is biophilia. How many of you have heard of biophilia? Not a lot. Well, maybe you'll learn one thing here. And biophilia has to do with plants. And we know that you have a positive physiological reaction when you look at plants. So if you'll notice in a lot of restaurants and hotels and office buildings, we see green plants. And if they're big enough where you could see the grains and the leaves, that's good, even if they're fake. No, I'm serious. Looking at plants is restorative. So if you're working on the computer and you can look out the window at plants for a few minutes, or even if 30 seconds, it will reduce the strain that you might get from working in your computer. So get plants in your house, get them in your office, wherever you can. Maybe not your car, but they have very positive impact. Building materials is another thing. You're seeing a lot more use of wood in buildings, even in restaurants. And we know that light wood, where you can see the grain, will give you a positive physiological reaction. Dark wood is not helpful. Light grain is good. You never want to have more than 50% wood. At least that's what the environmental psychologists say. But the different kind of materials will elicit different kind of responses, and scientists can kind of tell you how to design things so that we'll be restoring and not difficult.
Keeping people happy and calm. And some of these things are a little more expensive than others, but you were talking something as basic as color, which I would presume is relatively inexpensive if you want to do a paint job. Talk to us a little bit about color, like cougars, red, popular at U of H?
It is.
What
And
about
if
it,
we
Doc?
don't wear red on Fridays, we're in a lot of trouble.
Okay.
So I have an environmental psychologist buddy, and we at the house we decided we would renovate. And so I called and said, please tell me what colors to choose. So she said, well, what do you want to experience? And that's the key phrase that HR folks think about. And I should comment that I used to be an HR director for a bank that is now, or it still was, then headquartered in Charlotte, if you know what that one is. So as an HR person,
Code.
was Bank of America is what it's called, yeah, if you're not familiar with Charlotte. And she said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to experience, I'm going to have one of these as my office. And for the bedroom, we want it to be relaxing in that. And she gave me the Shern-Min paint colors. So for example, if you want a color to stimulate your thinking, it's not red or purple or bright Texas orange. It's a lime green. And in the bedroom, we have kind of a light blue on the walls and white on the top. And it's almost like we're in nature. It's just very relaxing. I have a car with a white interior. Right now, actually, I have a loaner, and it's black and red. And when I sit in that car, my blood pressure goes up. Right? Because it's so, at first it's kind of fun because it's a sporty car, but it's just not very relaxing. So the car, our main vehicle, and I guess both of them are very light and I didn't do it on purpose at first when I would buy light colored cars, but it really has an impact. So the colors that you choose, if you want people to get along, you want to have blues and mainly warm colors with white kind of embedded in that. So red is good if you want to do some exercise or something, but get books on the physiological responses to color, and you'll probably have a more relaxing and restorative environment. So if you have a social room, there are certain greens and blues that go together that encourage people to be more interactive. Other colors will reflect where you want to be engaged in thoughtful thinking or focused thinking.
Okay, so now I want to ask you something. This is just between y'all, okay? You and me here, because the boss didn't say I could tell you this. But we recently moved, KHOU TV Channel 11, recently, about 2-3 years ago, moved into a new facility because our old one flooded. So we went with this whole modern thing, which was like very trendy, I think kind of out like on the coasts, where you didn't get a permanent desk. So we each got assigned like a locker. So it's a cabinet on wheels, and it's got a number, and every day we're supposed to roll our cabinet out, and we can put it at any of those, desks, which are stand-up desks, by the way, if we want. So that was kind of cool. But the idea was that you didn't have to sit in the same place all the time. And we're going to be mobile and fluid and visit with everybody. So I'll tell you later how it worked out for us, but I'm going to ask the expert here if that's still the thinking, that this is like a great way to promote productivity and employee calm and social interaction. Doc?
So I'll give you the doctor answer and then the regular answer.
Okay, sure. We like 2 answers.
Because it might be fun for you guys to think about that. My couple of colleagues at University of California, Berkeley did a study a few years ago on what employees need for their behavioral environment to support the culture. So one of them is autonomy. Another one is belonging. So we know that most people, one of the reasons that a lot of people were stressed out during the pandemic was they were alone. And we know that mental health is, it's always been an issue. People don't change, but people are more aware of it and trying to address it. So the extent to which our identity it meets effectively with the environment is very important. If you don't have your own space and you're constantly changing it, your identity is affected because you don't necessarily have control over the environment, and maybe it's not yours. People don't like that. That's kind of the regular answer. People like to have their space and have their stuff, and they want to make it their own so that they can identify with and people will recognize it as theirs. And it doesn't always matter how big it is. Certainly there's people who get bent out of shape about if theirs is too small, but if I had control, if I can control the air conditioning level, that's great. If I can control the light, that's great. If I can make sure I don't have glare or there's something called circadian lighting systems that can change the appearance of the artificial natural light in different ways to represent what time of day it is. So it won't negatively impact your sleep and other biorhythmic type of factors. So I'm going to stop there because I think I've been going on too long.
No, not at all. Okay, so I won't tell on all the rest of my colleagues, but I'll tell you what I did. Is day one, they gave me my little locker, and it's got a number on it, and I rolled it out to this particular stand-up desk. And after 3 years, I'm in the same place. I have parked, I've moved in, I've signed a long-term lease, and that's it. Maybe that's true for other people too. So we could move if we wanted to. I will say also that if you have your same regular place, I think it makes you more efficient because you're not having to reinvent your setup every time you show up at work.
Nesting.
Is that what that is?
We all like to nest,
Okay,
right? And isn't moving where you live one of the top 10 stressors?
Yes, that is absolutely.
My daughter is in London, and her flat is being sold. And I have to hear about that frequently.
No nesting there.
Yeah, no.
I'm
Yeah,
nesting.
so nesting was very much disrupted. But people like their space and they like control. And you know, the people who designed these were mainly architects and designers that were trying to do new things that they like to do, and it hasn't worked out very well. People just don't like it, and they're miserable.
Okay.
And the pandemic has exacerbated that because they had a chance to get away. Sorry for interrupting.
No, because then you really are in your nest place. You're at home. So here's something else that I know we were chatting a little bit earlier, but it was very interesting to me. So one of the things that happens with us is we're on the phone all the time as reporters. And then, for example, it's entirely possible that you're calling some devastated family who's just lost a loved one. So you're trying to have a very somber, empathetic conversation, and the person next to you is, you know, booking the Texans who just won the playoff game, and so they're screaming and yelling. So you got a lot of very different conversations this close to each other in this big open space, which I feel like affects our ability to communicate well, but maybe also stresses people out while they're trying to, you know, cover up their microphone or their speaker to protect someone else who may be screaming and yelling, you know, with joy while you're having a somber conversation. So explain, if you would, some of the fascinating technology that's come up in terms of being able to give people sort of sound protection almost as well.
Well, I'll start off by saying that people like to have their own office with a door. Even if there's glass, which can be closed or shut, but there are certain circumstances where that's not the case. So some of you may be familiar with automobiles that for more than a decade have sound systems in them that will affect the road noise, where literally they have speakers in the back that aren't playing music. So that type of technology is used in mainly this is coming out of California and in Japan, where they can put speakers over people's over their desks in areas where it's just off, desk, with no wall in between them, so that you and I are sitting together and I can hear everything you're saying, and I'm trying to talk to the people in the Texans and you're talking to someone who's had a catastrophe. Those things can be adjusted so that she can't hear me and I can't hear her. And if we change how the controls are set, I'll be able to hear you guys in the back of the corner. But we also have visual systems where we can see scenes of nature and so forth that can sprinkle in those sounds. And as long as there's not a lot of water, which causes people to think they have to go to the bathroom. It's one of the things that they should have anticipated, but they found through science, that those kind of things can be very relaxing. And those things are still expensive, and they're still experimenting on those things, but the studies have been very promising. And they're not going to be terribly expensive overall, probably cheaper than putting in walls. So people are looking at those kinds of things to enhance workers' well-being.
That's interesting. And who knows? You guys are a bit young yet, but maybe it'll be a noise filter option that one day between you and your teenager that could be very attractive in your home.
Maybe we should start that company. We would stop working after we did that.
I like that. We'll offline on this later, Professor.
There you go.
Something else that you've talked about, which was a phrase I had not heard previously, was servant leadership, which echoed to me almost an idea of a ministry. But talk a little bit about that and why that could be important in, keeping and promoting a happy workplace.
Thank you. Most of you have probably heard of servant leadership. It came out in HR world in 1970. And for the record, I was alive in 1970. I was 11, right? And I think of it more in terms of romance. And I'd like to refer to Sally Field on this. Some of you familiar with Sally Field, the actress? She dated Burt Reynolds like in the 70s or 80s for like 5 years, and that was a big deal. And she did, she starred with a lot of people. And she was asked years ago of the people that she worked with, of the men who were like the most romantic to be with. And she named James Garner, who was famous for a lot of things, most recently probably the Rockford Files. And Garner's 18 years older. And like the reporter says, James Garner? And she said yes, because he understood romance. She said that romance is not how you feel about the other person. Romance is how you feel about yourself when you're with the other person. And servant leaders treat people with respect and dignity, even if they say no or have to hold them accountable for something. And they focus on their needs as appropriate to help them succeed in the workplace. It's a mindset that a lot of us focused on productivity and achievement don't really have. But if you treat people as the customer, they will generally respond. So as an HR people, we kind of focus on what the supervisor does to create the culture, but we ignore the physical environment. And we're suggesting if the servant leadership approach is appropriately implemented and you focus on the physical environment, then you'll be much more successful than those that don't take that approach.
And diversity, equity, inclusion has become an important part of companies and HR. Does servant leadership help promote that?
Well, maybe we can focus on DEI issues in the context of fairness. So if you've dealt with little kids, you know that they understand the concept of fairness very early. What is one of their favorite expressions?
It's not. Yeah.
Yes, which is slightly different than the teenage answer to that question. And we know that unfairness divides and fairness tends to unite. And servant leaders who treat their employees as customers tend to be, maybe they don't always give people the answer that they want, but the decision processes that they use are fair. They follow fair procedures, and people may not like the answer, but they appreciate the fairness and being treated with respect and so forth. And servant leaders that focus on not just the behavioral norms and the culture, but also the physical environment, create a more friendly, DEI responsive type of environment. It's just not, some DEI programs have not been successful. The studies have been very clear, and but some have been. So we'll leave that alone.
Okay. And I suppose one of the biggest changes in recent times in our workforce has been, thank you, COVID, work from home, right? So, and a lot of, I feel like a lot of younger folks coming into the workforce really feel like that's part of their equation, that they want that capability. And now there's been some backlash with companies, wondering how productive that might be. So do you have any observations about that? Is there, I don't know, some sort of middle ground people are experimenting with? Is work from home, a permanent part of the landscape? Do you have any observations or thoughts?
I do. Throughout the pandemic, I was on the phone with multiple corporate real estate people who are in a panic because people aren't wanting to come back, and HR people. And some of these people were pretty high end, and we discussed this intensively. And the answer is we don't know.
Ouch.
There's some ideas out there, but some of the work norms are changing, and we're still trying. It's happening in real time, And people are trying a lot of things, but we don't have a good answer. I wish I could have made up something, but the science is not there because it's happening so fast.
I think that's like a lot of things in life, right? When you're in the middle of it, you don't have the answer yet, but that's how we work towards it and unfold it and hopefully find one.
We're trying to get the ball in the basket, but we're missing a lot of shots. I'm not referring to UH at all. I'm just saying generally, we in the profession.
We should talk about the track team if we're going to talk about it, or baseball at UH.
I did not make the track team when I was in school.
I watched the track team when I was in school. I think we're about winding down on our time. Is there any question from the audience? Would anyone like, we probably have time for one or two questions. Does anybody have got something they might like to ask Professor Witt? Well, this is your chance. You got a problem that you're trying to solve? Oh, I see a hand in the back. Yes, sir. You want to stand and kind of project a bit?
Yes, I was curious, what unforeseen benefit or behavior do you think leaders should focus on to get the best out of the work? Something that we never considered, that probably doesn't cost money.
Oh, okay. Right, so
He threw out the not cost money part.
that's correct. So something we haven't done before that doesn't cost any money, that might
Well, part of
aid
it might
leadership.
be some places don't have very, very strict rules about what you can do, and some people have very, very strict rules about what you can do in designing your office space. So I think doing some kind of a study or having a little committee to figure out how we can better accommodate people's needs in the workplace without allowing it to go ridiculous. Because what happens is some people spill something or that something happens and somebody in senior management responds very forcefully to say, you can no longer do this. So one thing
you can no longer have coffee.
Yep. That would really cause a lot of consternation
Yes.
in some areas. So it's not an ideal answer, but one thing is to look at how people can can control their environment, and also to indicate to what extent do places allow for people to socialize. You know, introverts want to be left alone, extroverts not so much. And to what extent you're kind of facilitating those people's interaction needs.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Professor Alan Witt. I want to make sure I get this right. Professor of Management and Leadership, Public Policy and Psychology with U of H's Bauer School of Business. Thank you very much for your insights, sir. Thank you.